they've heard before.
Erev Tov, Rabbi.
Hi, Sal. Thanks for joining.
Nice to see you. Farokh, L'chaim.
Thank you.
Something to him, Rob, please.
So looking forward to hearing you again. We so enjoyed it the first time.
Thank you.
I just finished reading the book Aria again, and boy, does it ever give a feeling for Tehran in the old days.
Yes.
Okay, everyone, it's 8:45, and so we're going to get started shortly. Please be careful to stay on mute. We're going to be beginning the program, which is now the fourth of our storytelling programs. And it's really an honor for us to be able to hear Farokh Hakimi's story. And it's a privilege for us as a community to be able to have Farokh as a part of our community and to have all he brings, both in terms of his personal story, but also the lineage that he carries with him in terms of the legacy of thousands of years of Jewish life within Iran and Persia that he carries with him. And so I'm going to turn over now to Robin to introduce Dalia and Farokh and our program.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. In the fourth of this series, the storytelling project was the brainchild of a group of volunteers in the shul who thought about how we could create social connections in this time of separation. And we all recognize that really the best stories will come from within. We have such an incredible community and so many people from so many diverse backgrounds. And really what the series has shown us is that in fact it's true. We've generated a lot of interest and really gotten to know each other better through the opportunity to tell stories. So if anyone here has a story to tell and would like to share it, please be in touch with me. We're going to be reactivating the series next fall with more stories to tell. I now have the honor of introducing our interviewer this evening. Dalia Kronenberg was born in Mexico City and moved to Toronto when she was 9 years old. She currently works as a financial engineer lead at D1G1T Digit, a wealth management fintech company. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Applied Math and has a master's degree in mathematical finance. She's a proud mom to Eitan, Alex, and Eliana. She's married to Shlomi Younger, who's a wonderful board member. She is the co-chair of the Shul's Youth Committee, and she is most recently the dog mom of a dog, golden doodle named Zahavi, which I've had the privilege of meeting. And with that, I will turn the floor over to Dalia.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be doing this. And I'm actually very excited because as you, I guess, will hear while we speak later, my family and I have known the Hakimis for probably since the 80s. As we'll hear, the Hakimis lived in Denver for about 20 years. And my uncle Miguel lives in Denver. He's been living there probably since the mid 70s. So whenever my family and I went to Denver for bar mitzvahs and for simchas, you know, my parents knew the Hakimis. I was friends with their son Isaac because he's the same age as me, and he was good friends with my cousin Eric. So, you know, when I lived in New York for a few years, when I moved back to Toronto and you know, moved to the Shar Shemaim area, it was, you know, nice to know that, you know, there was somebody there that, you know, we had some history with. So I'm really excited to be doing this. And I'm excited to hear about Farokh's history. So now just to give you a little background, and I'm sure you've seen from, you know, the posting from Shul, Farokh is a retired executive VP and chief financial officer at Inco Limited, the Western world's largest producer of nickel. Prior to that, he was a VP and CFO of Rio Alga Mining Company and VP and treasurer of the Cypress Amex Minerals Company in Denver. He started his career at Amoco Chemicals in Chicago after receiving his Bachelor of Science from the University of Massachusetts and master's and PhD degrees from Princeton in chemical engineering. As we will hear, Farokh was born in Mashadi, Iran, but he grew up in Tehran. He's married to Dalia, same name as me, different spelling. And they have been active members at Shar Shamayim since they moved here over 20 years ago. They have 4 children, all living in the United States. So with that, we welcome Farokh and Dalia. And I guess Farokh, we're probably gonna start obviously wanting to hear a little bit about your childhood and your background. So maybe we could start with that, just, you know, your early childhood in Mashhad and your experience growing up there, and I guess your eventual move to Tehran. So I'm sure people would love to hear about that. To me, you know, when we first spoke, it was all very new to me. So, and it's really, really interesting.
Thank you, Dalia. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. As Rabbi mentioned at the beginning, the story of the Jews in Iran go back to the destruction of first temple 2,700 years ago. So the Jews have been in Iran, different parts of Iran, the Persian Empire, which was included Babylonia and everywhere else. But the focus probably for me would be talking about the community I come from, Jews of Mashhad. I was born in Mashhad. I was only 1 year old when we left for Tehran. So I never really experienced living in Mashhad per se, but once you're a Mashhadi Jew, it's in your blood. So what Mashhadi Jews were, Mashhad is the second largest city in Iran. It's the holiest city of the Shiite Muslims. Iran was at the time of Cyrus was Zoroastrian, and the Jews lived pretty good life under Zoroastrians. Then the Arabs came, the Islam conquered Iran, and the Sunnis were okay overall. There were times where the Jews were under pressure, but overall they did well. But in 1500s in Iran, a new dynasty started, and that dynasty was Shiite and very fanatical Shiite. And one of the aspects of Shiite Islam is they do not like minorities per se. They want everybody to be a Shiite. And they also do not like Sunnis, but for them, the people they put the most pressure on were the Jews throughout. One of the aspects of Shiite Islam that they started emphasizing, saying that the Jews were najas. Najas is tameh, they are impure. So the Jews were not allowed to touch Muslims or sell them goods that will be eaten like fruit or other things. And to the level of extreme of if it was raining outside, if the Jews walked outside in the streets, and if the rain splashes from your Jewish body to a Muslim body, then it was a major issue. So then Mashhad was the site of the holiest site of one of the prophets who died there. And it's a usual pilgrimage. Millions of people, Shiite Muslims, come to Mashhad every year. Jews, I don't want to go to a lot of detail, but they ended up in Mashhad for their reasons of their own control. And they stayed there, but and there were no requirement that the Jews has to live in a ghetto per se, but by necessity, they lived in the same area with each other because they couldn't trade with the Muslims. They couldn't deal with the Muslims. So the Jews entered Mashhad about over 300 years ago. But in 1839, there was a pogrom against the Jews, right? Arab Pesach. It wasn't related to Pesach, but it happened to be Arab Pesach. They killed a lot of Jews. They kidnapped a lot of the children, girls in particular. And then they said, you have to convert all of you, otherwise we'll kill every one of you. So the community as a whole decided to convert to Islam. Now, this has happened under the Shiites throughout the history in different parts of Iran, that they forced conversion, but usually it lasted weeks, months, at most a year. But with Mashadi Jews, this lasted over 100 years. The reason why the Jews will, after a few weeks or months, will convert back, because they didn't want to stay Muslim. And one of the things was the Jews who lived in Iran, there was a poll tax, head tax that they had to pay because they were being protected by the Muslims. So you had an extra money that was going into the pocket of the authorities. And once they converted, they didn't pay that poll tax. And once they come and started competing with the Muslims didn't like it because Jews were doing well. So they typically allowed the Jews go back to become Jewish so they can step on them and collect more taxes. But Mashhad was so fanatical that they wanted the Jews to stay Muslim. So over 100 years, over 4 or 5 generations, the Jews in Mashhad lived a double life. It wasn't like conversos because they kept everything inside the house. If anything, they kept more strict than ever. They built tunnels between homes so they can go and daven in somebody's basement. They all learned, the men learned to shecht chickens so they can bring live chicken at home and shecht it properly. They had a lot of, the men had a lot more difficulty because they were exposed to all the Arab, Jewish, non-Jews, all the Muslims in the marketplace. The woman, thank God, in Iran, no Muslim man enters somebody's house because they are not allowed to look at the women in the house. So women inside the house had all the freedom, and the women really kept the Judaism alive because men had to go to mosque every day with the Muslims. They had to pray publicly with them. They had to Friday go there. But then Friday night, they come and make kiddush and daven and that type of thing. So this lasted 100 years till Shah, the last Shah of Iran, and his father actually started liberalizing things. And the last uprising against the Jews in Mashhad was in 1946. So this was over 100 years later. Again, they arose again because they saw that a lot of people who said they called themselves new Muslims were not really new Muslims. So the Jews of Mashhad, then they picked themselves up and they, en masse, they left Mashhad, came to Tehran. Now, some went to other places such as London and Milan, Italy, but majority stayed in Tehran. Tehran under the Shah was protective of the Jews and minorities. And Jewish people, they say golden age of Iranian Jews under the Shah was that 20 years between 58 and 78 when he was deposed. During that era, Jews of Mashhad had moved to Tehran, but because they felt that Tehrani Jews were not religious enough, they would not allow their children to marry the Tehrani Jews. They built this mentality of building fences around themselves because it took them 100 years to keep things, and they didn't want them to be exposed to other ideas, other ways of doing things. So the Mashhadi Jews are within the Jewish community of Iran are very segregated, very separate, and they kept it separate. And then after the revolution in 78, they pretty much, a lot of them went to Israel, but pretty much the center moved to New York. In Great Neck, they built 4 shuls, but they wouldn't step into a Tehrani shul or a Isfahani shul or Shirazi shul. They had to have their own. They still have the children pretty much arranged marriage or through a shidduch and this and that type of thing to marry each other. My parents in Iran, one of the ramifications of being Muslim, pretending being Muslim, was they were very concerned about the children, especially the girls, being asked for their hands by the Muslims. So the children at a very young age will get engaged to another, either cousin or somebody within the Jewish families to avoid that. My mother got engaged at the age of 10 to my father, got married to him at the age of 20, and they were first cousins. My grandmother, my father's mother, married at the age of 13. So that's the type of life that I had to preserve to maintain their Judaism while that double life. Now they brought that community to New York, and they have still, while taking care of their own community, but within even the Iranian Jewish community in the US, they still keep themselves separate. So, but I grew up in Tehran. When we moved to Tehran, things were a lot freer, but the fanatics in Iran, the Shiite fanatics, that minority that now controls the entire country, but that minority was always there. So, and the minorities hated the Jews throughout. There was neighborhoods in Tehran that if they found out you were Jewish, that you would be killed, no doubt about it. So Jews could never, ever publicly wear a kippah or show that they are Jewish. So I grew up there. There was a Jewish day school in Tehran, but it was not a very high quality education. Secondly, it was run by the Tehranis, and the Mashadi Jews did not do that. So what I learned was Talmud Torah. I went to a regular public school, and then I went to a high school in Iran. But only I learned from my rabbi that used to teach my father all of a sudden. He was an old man, but they kept the tradition alive. So I finished high school in Iran. I was good in my studies, and I wanted to come to the US to study. But I told my parents, I'd like to go to the US by myself and go to university, but I don't intend to come back. I will come back to visit, but I'm not coming back to Iran to live. And my parents said, look, under the Shah, it's Gan Eden, Iran. Everything is fine. Shah is protecting us. And so my answer to my parents was, why would I want to live in a country that always have to be protected from the population? The fanatics were there. Shah was stepping on them, but they were there. They were always there. Now, unfortunately, my father's business had gone quite severely damaged during that era, and they didn't have much money. But they managed to get a one-way ticket for me to New York plus $500. And I said, fine. And in Iran, in Tehran at that time, there was a service, American service, that translated my transcripts and applied on my behalf the type of school I wanted to go. They asked me, what were you planning to do? I said, I like chemical engineering. And I also said I didn't have much money for tuition, so it cannot be very expensive university. So they got me into University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas. And based on that, I got a student visa to come by myself. I was 17 when I left Iran.
Okay, so that was my question, to how old you were and where you went, and I guess why you decided to leave.
And I came without any family, so by myself.
And in Kansas, that's the first place you were at?
No, I came to New York.
Oh, from New York to there.
But I never went to Kansas. So I came to New York, the only family, the closest family member I had was a second cousin, a couple of years older than me. And actually, I had contacted him beforehand, and he said he'll come meet me at the airport, but turned out he couldn't come, and he had sent some other people, friends, to come and pick me up from the airport. I didn't speak much English at that stage. And I came to his room. He was working during the day, so I came there. And we sat down and talked. And I said, I've gotten into University of Kansas, but I don't know whether there are any Jews in Kansas. And he said, no, there's no place for you to go to Kansas. This is not a place to go. Stay in New York. And he said he had himself gone to Queens College in New York for learning English as a second language. And he said there, do that, then you apply. And he was going to Massachusetts after that. So I lived with him for a week, and then I went to the Queens College to register. And as long as I was part of a university or college, then there was no issue with my student visa. So I went to university, and the university said, that's great, sure. We can enroll you $350 cash upfront for the tuition. And by then I had less than $500. So I ended up with less than $138 in my pocket. And I was concerned. So I asked the registrar there that were there any other Persian people in the school at that time. And she looked around and said, oh, you see those 4 or 5 people, they're Persian. So I approached them and started talking to them. And lucky for me, and Dalia, my wife, always says that I had a malach on my shoulder, they were Jewish. And then I started asking, how do you guys support yourself? Because I don't have much money and I'm just got here. One of the guy who was the oldest of the group said, yeah, we're working in a Jewish hotel, a kosher hotel in New Jersey, in Verona. Verona is a suburb, is in West Orange, New Jersey, which is not too far from Manhattan. It's less than an hour drive. And that's where we worked on weekends and summers. I asked him, could he see if they need another help, somebody? He said, sure, let me call. And he did call, and they said, yeah, bring him. We need a busboy, so bring him. And the luck was kosher hotel. You're allowed to work on weekends and Shabbat because you're serving others. And because it was proximity of Manhattan, was year-round open on weekends. And then summertime from Memorial Day, which is the end of May, till Labor Day, beginning of September, they had the entire resort open. It was a big golf course and the resort area. So the first weekend I went there, as a busboy, I didn't know much of anything. So when somebody asked for a ketchup, I ran to the kitchen and yelled ketchup, and somebody would show me what ketchup was, things like that. So from there, that weekend, I got $26 in tips. And I wrote a long letter to my parents, said, this is Gan Eden. In one weekend, I increased my net worth by 25%. And thank God, that's what I stayed in New York for 2 semesters to learn English. And weekends I went there. Pesach I was there, I was working, but it was fine. Winter break, worked there. Thanksgiving holidays, worked there. And that summer, and I earned enough money to then move on to Massachusetts. I applied for and got into Massachusetts. And the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, that I ended up, was a good school. It was a state school, not too expensive. But again, after one semester, I managed to get scholarship. They had one merit scholarship for 600 foreign students, and I managed to get that one. So I didn't have to pay tuition, and I enjoyed being in school. I was good at what I did, chemical engineering, but I also minored in Russian studies because the requirement was you take per semester minimum 12 credits or 15 credits people took. I usually took 20 or 22 credits because it's free. So I kept taking courses. I enjoyed different things. So I did that. That's how I stayed. Now, there wasn't much religious Jewish life there at that time. Now I understand there's a Chabad and other things. There was a Hillel house, but it was not religious Hillel house. They didn't keep, the time that they kept, it was Pesach. If there were students who stayed around, they helped them with keeping the Pesach, but wasn't there. So it was, I had to find ways to maintain and my kashrut and other things. It was difficult, but I enjoyed school. I always considered school was 9 months of vacation and 3 months of work at the hotel. After 1 year, I became a waiter, and thank God, just working summers, I managed to put myself to college. I also, this was late 80s, and I was in Massachusetts from 67 to 71. There was, this is after 67 war in Israel. So there was a lot of turmoil by the PLO and the Palestinians on campuses and everything else, anti-Israel. So, but I was very much involved in defending Israel, putting programs, having speakers, things like that come over. And on my senior year, as I was finishing, I was selected by Israeli government as part of the what they call leadership training program through AZYF, American Zionist Youth Foundation. They invited 35 students from 35 colleges and universities of US and Canada to come to Israel at the Israeli government's expense for a month. And they took us everywhere and met a lot of authorities, we went to kibbutzim, we went to Palestinian refugee camps, we did all those things. So I was actually, because I was then transitioning from UMass to Princeton, I became representative from Princeton for them. So that was that summer before graduate school. Then I continued, I went to Princeton, but then I had full fellowship with the stipend and everything. And so I didn't have to work as a waiter anymore. I just did my research.
You quit your job, your good job at the hotel.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the hotel was I became quite familiar very early on American cuisine, American Jewish cuisine, the best of the best. I also managed to learn, not to speak, but to learn to understand Yiddish, because a lot of the clientele were Yiddish speaking.
That's true.
I knew more Yiddish than my wife Dalia does. Anyway, and I actually, as part of my chemical engineering undergraduate, I had to take German as a second language because a lot of articles were in German. And we had to join a German club, and they elected me as the president of the German club. And what I did was they had get-togethers and speeches and this and movies about culture, German culture. So I brought a lot of Holocaust movies to be shown as part of the German culture. But my Yiddish helped me with my German. That is, I understood German a lot better because of the Yiddish I learned. So that was the story. Then I continued with my education at Princeton. Princeton was interesting because that summer when I got into Princeton, I went there. There was no kosher dining facility at Princeton on the campus. There were some graduate students who lived off campus and they had their own facilities, but we helped together and we approached the universities, and Princeton has a lot of what they call it eating clubs, private feeding clubs within the campus that people had to apply for. It's very hard to get in. And one of them was called Stevenson's Hall, had two mansions next to each other, had gone bankrupt. And we approached the university had taken them over, approached them and said, we'd like to make one of those as kosher the place, kosher dining room. University thought about it and said, all right, two conditions. The cost of converting the facilities is about, at that time, $70,000. You have to raise half of it. The other requirement was you have to have 35 students. Now, in this case, graduate or undergraduate can apply, just eat there, to say this is their primary eating club. Now, the reality is if you can just say, this is my club, but you can eat in any other facilities or university, no problem. So raising the money was easy. Getting 35 Jewish kids to say that they are part of this Jewish organization was more difficult, but we managed to get it. One thing we did do, we hired a very nice grandmotherly type of, she was a chef. She came, Mrs. Molly Green, her name was. And she cooked fantastic food. And she was very motherly. She would come and say, oh, you don't like this? I'll make you something else. It's like the tray treated us like their children or grandchildren. So by the fourth year I was there, we had 125 kids eating there regularly. And that became a center of Jewish life at Princeton. We didn't put any pressure on people. Friday nights, people would come. Dining room was open early because there's a requirement, but we davened upstairs in the library. And some people came early, ate, left, but some people came and said, oh, everybody's upstairs. They started coming up to the minyan. We did a lot of singing, and after that, come down, we all ate together a Shabbat meal, and then we sat and sang Zemirot till midnight. And that becomes such a place without any coercion or pressure. A lot of non-observant Jews started coming in of more and more there. So that was the story of graduate school.
And what was it like? I guess it was probably your first time also to start meeting Jewish students that were, from everywhere else, that like, Eastern European background or,
Yeah, we had graduate students from all over, from Israel, from Canada, others who ate in that dining room. And we had also a lot of foreign students, a lot of Americans from different places. So exposure was there, and it was quite an education, and I enjoyed it. School was, to me, it was always fun to be in.
And you met Dalia at Princeton as well, right?
Yes. Dalia's first cousin, Ori Bargada, who lives in Israel, at that time, he had not had much background in Judaism. He was, but because there was a Jewish dining room, he signed up for it. So we became friendly. And Dalia, my wife, is an architect, so she wanted to come and see Princeton's campus, because Princeton's campus is one of the nicest campuses anywhere in the world. So, and her cousin set us up. She came as for the weekend, and that was it. Thank God.
The rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history.
So I guess now I'm sure a lot of people just want to know, you studied chemical engineering, you have a PhD in chemical engineering. How did that take you to your career? Like, I'm interested also just to hear, you know, what you did for work for all those years. And I guess it took you to different places, right? That's why you ended up in Denver as well.
Yeah. I got a PhD in chemical engineering. I was good at my work. And I was hired by Amoco oil company. Amoco was a very major, substantial $250 billion company out of Chicago. But I joined the chemical division in the research. They have a fantastic research facility outside of Chicago in Naperville. They had like 1,500 PhDs and master's degree on campus. It was a great place. And I did research for 3 years. Thank God I did very well. And the oil companies had this policy to keep on looking at the scientists and engineers and try to see whether they have the interest and also capability of moving into the business side, because they felt that there's a value to having an engineering type of person be mixed with the business people. So 3 years I was doing very well in research, but they came to me and said, we decided as a company, we're going into mining and minerals as well as a new subsidiary. It's going to be very entrepreneurial, very dynamic. We'll be acquiring a lot of companies. Would you consider joining them? I said, what is that all about? He said, well, yeah, you join them in the group, they call it planning and economics. Supposed to be you're doing all the economic models and financial models for acquisition targets. You're helping business development people to understand the risks and rewards of opportunities. I had no idea what they were talking about. I did not have any business background, but I am different than some other people. Some people, when they get a degree, they want to really perfect that where they are and deeper and deeper into that area. For me, it was as I was getting very good, high ranking within that. To me, I was more like I would say, mountain climber. I climb a mountain, I get to the top, then I look around for a higher mountain. Oh, there's a higher peak. So it was a challenge of getting to know something different. So they came to me, and it was a difficult decision because essentially it was moving away from the technical background. But thank God I joined them. I was like number 42 people, 42 person they hired. And the end up at the company, we had 6,000 people by the time I finished with them. So within a year, I was working with the MBAs from the University of Chicago, from Harvard, and from Stanford, but I was the only engineer among them. But within a year, I was supervising those guys. So it wasn't rocket science. It was to me, it was interesting because I didn't know anything about it. So I learned so much very fast about it. And then the division, the mining division, decided to move the headquarters to Denver. That's why and at that stage, then this was 2 years after I joined them, they gave me a choice to stay with mining and minerals, move to Denver, or go back to research because research wanted me back. And that was a big decision. Should I go back to research or move on? Chicago was a fantastic. Chicago Jewish community is similar to Toronto. Many options, many neighborhoods you can live, many restaurants. Denver's different, a different story. But ultimately, big companies, big corporations in particular, it's silos. You stay within, you report to your boss who reports to his boss who is report. You don't have interaction crosswise. In the minerals, we were so new that there was a lot of crossing over between different fields. So we decided, I decided, and Dalia reluctantly came along to Denver. By then we had our two boys. Ari was almost 2 and Isaac was 6 months. And we moved to Denver, and Denver is a beautiful city, fantastic climate, 4 seasons, dry summers, dry winters, good amount of snow, good amount of good weather summertime. Everything is perfect, except the Jewish community per se is very, well, observant Jewish community is very small. There is a big Jewish community in Tehran. I don't know, now it's probably close to 100,000. But at that time when we came, the Orthodox community was very, very small. There was a west side, which was there was a yeshiva, which was very black hat, it's Lakewood type of yeshiva on the west side, and a couple of Orthodox schools there. And the east side, which is very pretty part of the city, very nice neighborhood, we had only one Orthodox school called East Denver Orthodox Synagogue, EDOS.
Yeah, still there.
Yeah, and EDOS was, we all said it was a kitchen with a shul attached. The emphasis was on the cholent and eating and the kiddush. Let's finish this davening fast and let's get to the kiddush. But it was a fantastic community because it was so small that everybody had to rely. It's like having an extended family. When we moved there, there were no kosher restaurants, no kosher bakeries, no kosher caterer, except if you go to a hotel for a wedding, then they kosher or something for you. So all the ladies, as Dalia would say, my wife, they had to become balabusta. They had to learn to do things. So they cooked for each other when there was a bris or a bar mitzvah or something. The ladies got together, or the men at the shul, the men made the cholent. They wouldn't let the woman touch the cholent until that generation died away. So good community in terms of friends for life that we made, limited options for Jewish rights, and especially schooling. Schooling was the biggest problem. There was a Hillel Academy was at one time was a school for all from the Haredim to the Russians without any background. But then Haredim decided to make it more of a cheder. So the modern Orthodox people left, started their own school. And the Russians fell away because we lost a lot of people who stopped coming to Jewish school. So we ended up, for instance, our 3 boys, we have 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. our three boys, at the age of 13, we ended up sending them to Skokie Yeshiva, because the yeshiva in Denver was not the type of yeshiva we wanted them to be exposed to. But my daughter, Sharona, we didn't want to send her out. So it was difficult because there was a cultural Jewish school, but she was the only religious girl in that school.
That was the Rocky Mountain Academy?
Yeah. Ramah, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty good school, very small, very tiny, but Shabbat was difficult because there were no other friend kept Shabbat. So
the Mogiros kept Shabbat. The Mogiros family kept Shabbat.
Yeah, among the girls. The boys, there were a couple of boys who kept it, but for her, there was no. So it was, but thank God we all did well. And then what happened was that company I was with, which originally started with Amoco as Amoco Minerals, then became Cyprus Amex. We were spun off. We became independent of Amoco, new public company. And my company, I was with them, moved on from planning economics into the marketing side, into the market analysis, into the contract negotiations, became general manager of marketing, sales and marketing, and then became the assistant treasurer because two major contracts I had negotiated with the steel companies for selling coal to them went bankrupt, the company, and then I became the expert on dealing with the bankruptcy issues and raising. Essentially, we recovered $140 million for lost profits for those contracts. So I became an expert in that, and so they asked me to become an assistant treasurer and then director of finance. Then I became VP and treasurer. Again, no background, never went to a business school. But if you have a mind that could analyze things certain ways and think about it critically about things, it's not that difficult. So I moved on to become treasurer of the public company. Then in year 1999, that Cyprus Amex was subject to takeover by a company from Phillips Dodge from Phoenix, Arizona. And they wanted me to move to Phoenix with them, but we said no way, because the Jewish community in Phoenix is a fraction of Jewish community in Denver in terms of what they had. So again, very large Jewish people, but the observant community is very small. So what I was lucky because Rio Algom mining company of Toronto had been asking me to join them for a few months. And I kept saying, go away, because I was happy what I was doing. But once this happened, that was it, Rio Algom. I joined them, I joined Rio Algom as their CFO. And that's why we left Toronto to Denver and came to Toronto. And Toronto was really the major reason why we said, right, Toronto is great, is Jewish life, is school for Sharona. Sharona, my daughter, was in the first year of high school. She finished in Denver. And then she joined Urpana here, and she was in heaven.
For sure.
She had in a class with 35 girls just like herself.
So one question, during this whole time, I guess, and we were going back probably 2 decades, but were you able to go back to Iran? Was there family there? Were you able to come back and forth? Has Dalia been there? Were you able to visit?
The last time I went to Iran was 1974.
Oh, wow.
This was, stepping back, 1971, my father, all of a sudden, passed away. I was 23 at that time. I took a leave of absence from Princeton and went for 8 months back to Iran to be with my mother and my little sister at that time. And then, as long as I was a student, I could go back to Iran with no problem. But once I got my PhD, if I had come back to Iran, I never served in the army service in Iran because I was always deferred because I was a student. Then I was obligated to go to the Iranian army. And I told the 74, I told my mother that actually I went back to Iran to tell her about Dalia, my wife, my at that time girlfriend, and tell her that we're getting serious. And the other thing I told her is, once I get my PhD, I cannot come back to Iran. And that motivated my mother and sister to move to Israel. And so that was the last time we were, that I was in Iran.
Oh, wow.
But funny thing was, when Dalia and I met, Dalia was working as an architect for a firm in New York City, and they had projects in Iran. Iran, the Shah was being commercialized and industrialized, so it was a very dynamic environment, and really, they needed a lot of professionals. And while I was at Princeton, I received a letter from the University of Tehran, the most prominent university in Iran, that we understand you're getting your PhD at Princeton in chemical engineering. We'd like to offer you a position as a professor in the university without even saying anything about my work, nothing. And they offered salary 2.5 times what I was going to earn in the US. So Dalia, my wife, heard that and said, great, we're going to go back to Iran. I can work for the same company. I'm working in New York. I'll be there, we'll go and I'll see the whole thing. And I told her, I lived in Iran as a Jew. I'm not going back there as to live. And thank God we didn't go back, because 5 years later, Shah was gone.
Yeah.
And again, my mother in late 74, early 75 moved to Israel.
Okay, so your family was there.
So since that, 74, the last time I went there.
Okay. So I guess now, because it's getting later, we want to kind of hear about your story in Toronto. And I guess when you did move, what made you, there's so many different neighborhoods and communities in Toronto, obviously. So, what made you choose Shar Shemayim, and what was your experience first coming? You didn't know, I assume you didn't know too many people. So what was it like?
Yeah, we didn't know that many people, but we borrowed friends or families of the friends who had somebody here. So we had a couple connections that we met up with. And we looked at Jewish neighborhoods. We looked at down here. We looked at Clanton Park.
The box called the promo code box.
And we looked at Thornhill. And really, Thornhill was too far for me to commute, because
I the coupon on Walmart grocery. Add products to the cart and proceed to the checkout page.
We need to mute someone.
Okay. All right. So we said no to Thornhill because it was just too far from downtown for me to commute. Clanton Park was interesting, but it felt the options are or Chaim or Chaim type of thing. So we said, we looked around and said, there are so many different schools, so many different opportunities. Look around and find the one that fits us the best. So when we came here, we had met friends who were members of Shomer Shabbos. And we also saw what Shar Shemayim is all about, more inclusive, more Big Tent type of thing, people with different backgrounds being part of the same institution. So we joined both of them. For first 10 years of here, we were occasionally back in Shomrei Shabbos here. So we made friends there and we made friends here. But really, Sha'arei Shemayim being the inclusive type of nature of Sha'arei Shemayim really was attractive to us. Non-judgmental type of thing, trying to make life easy for people rather than always new humble of the week type of situation. Bigger in terms of meeting a lot of different people, different backgrounds, different. So we met a lot of wonderful people. Dalia has been extremely involved. She was co-chair of the adult education for quite a few years, then co-chair of the Chesed committee, sat on the board for many years. I sat on the board for many years. So we really enjoyed being at Sha'arei Shemayim and being part of this community. We enjoy Toronto. Toronto is ideal for us. Big city, but has a very nice Jewish community with options. It's like some good restaurants, but that's besides the point.
That is true. No, that's really interesting. So I guess I know when we were speaking before, you mentioned when you were in university, some people, are very protective, if they're Ashkenaz, I'm Hungarian, if like my grandparents' Hungarian food or someone's, Moroccan, whatever. But I remember you always said that to you, it didn't matter. You were happy to eat people's cholent or this and that. Like you were just happy. And you said, a Jew is a Jew. It doesn't matter where they come from. So is that how you felt about the shul? That it was just, everyone's Jewish, doesn't really matter what your background was?
The reality is I came from the Mashadi culture that is extremely insular. They protect each other, but there is a lot of machloket within the community. They're at each other's throats. So sometimes it's so suffocating in some sense, because they try to maintain the same tradition, whether it was right or wrong, but they keep it forever and ever and ever type of thing. This is how it should be done. The marriages should be arranged by the parents type of thing, the stories. For me, I was essentially saying, I am a Jew. I like to meet other Jews from everywhere and see how they live and what they do. To me, common denominator being Jewish and being observant. No, I meet a lot of non-observant Jews and they're fantastic people. But the question was, if you see it, I look at what commonality we have rather than what differences. Yeah, I eat different food, but so what? I started enjoying the years I was a waiter and busboy that resorts of food I enjoyed American food, I enjoyed Chinese food, this food, that food. So to me, I didn't focus on the differences, I focused on commonalities, on the things. And then I started trying to focus on what's good in each one to emulate. So I've never said I have to go to Sephardic shul and minyan, or I have to go to Ashkenazi, or I have to go this, that. I go to whatever shuls. I ended up in Taimani shul in Tel Aviv by accident, but very different type of shul, but enjoyed it very much. So that's my mentality. So it's different than if you go to typical Mashadi, they only want to do not only Persian shuls, but only Mashadi shuls and eat only the Mashadi foods. And to me, I'm different.
Right. Okay. Well, I want to make sure there's time for questions that people have asked. So I think I'm going to ask some of the questions that people have asked. But before that, just I guess, what are you most excited? Once this is finally over, one of these days. When you come back to shul, what are you most excited about? When you finally come into shul without a mask and with a full minyan. And
but it's a really tragedy that we have a beautiful shul. We can with the room we have, we can put few hundred people, 800 people with the banquet hall and everything, and we are subject to 10 people. What I'm looking for is seeing people coming there, not only for social aspect, but shul is Orthodox shul. It's supposed to be the spiritual part, going to minyan together with everybody, and then going to Kiddush and this and that.
Right.
And as shul without the minyan, without this presence of the community, it's just a building.
Right.
It's like you're going to reform shuls, reform temples in the US, and some of them on Shavuot, they write closed for the holidays because nobody goes to shul. Yeah. So they close on Yom Tov, they close the shul. So to me, that is not a shul. It's a building in a monument. Yeah. But I'm looking forward to it. Thank God. Thank God with vaccination, maybe one of these days or these years.
God willing. Okay, I'm going to take now. Thank you so much, Farokh. I think now, Robin, if it's okay, I'm going to take a couple of questions that people have written, and then I don't know if we open it up for a few after, but I'll start with some of the messages that people have asked. So one of the questions was, you know, when you came to the US as a newcomer, how were you able to maintain your Jewish identity in what would seem like, you know, would be impossible, especially being exposed to, you know, America? And, you know, you mentioned, especially at the beginning in Massachusetts, there weren't a lot of religious Jews. So what were your main influences? Was it the insular Mashadi community that, even though you said it was a little too insular, is that what kind of kept you?
Yeah, I kept, because at home, we were raised that you observe, you maintain. And we tried our best. When I came to New York, actually, after my cousin left, I moved with 3 other Persian guys, not Mashadi, Persian guys, Jewish guys, in an apartment. And because I kept kosher and I observed Shabbat, this and that, they called me Chacham. So it wasn't comfortable being among them. So I decided I'm gonna be better off going and renting a room in somebody's house and be by myself and maintain what I do. So that was my upbringing. Even at UMass, my second cousin was there. Between the two of us, we find ways to maintain as much we can. It was difficult, but that was the upbringing I had. I couldn't see it. As I said, 100 years of Mashadi Jews struggling to stay Jewish with all the adversities they were confronting. So why would I give it up?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then I guess one other related question, or just, you know, still from when you were in Iran, you mentioned that the Sunni Muslims persecuted all minorities, but the Jews the most. Why do you think?
Shia, not the Sunni, Shia.
Oh, sorry. So why do you think kind of the Jewish people more than any other minority that was there?
There is a legend, according to Shiites, one of the wives of the Prophet Muhammad was actually Jewish. And the legend is that that wife poisoned Muhammad. So this is what they have. While in Quran, Judaism and Christianity are called the people of the book. They are protected in that sense. But the Shiites, in particular, are very much looking at that aspect of that they feel that Jews had done damage to Islam. If you ask them, they could say, no, we just want everybody to become Shia Muslims. That's what they want.
Right.
So.
Okay. And did you have any family there still?
Nobody left there. No, nobody. The Jewish community in Iran is up to 20,000. There are few Mashadis, handful, are back there. I had one uncle who sent the family out, But he stayed. He said, I'm too old to come to different country and learn the language and do business. So I stayed back, and he died by himself. So no, that was the last one. That was about 8 years ago.
Okay, so no close family.
No.
Okay, I have a few more questions, and then I'll pass it on to Robin. But someone is asking, how do former Iranian and current Iranian Jews reconcile themselves to the stance of the current regime and the prospects of potential conflict and the Iranian regime's nuclear ambitions?
That's a discussion for
a whole other session.
A political discussion for maybe an hour of discussion about that. That I'm sorry, I cannot really.
It's a long, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess one last question: do you find any similarities or differences between Jewish communities in Iran, Syria, and Lebanon? Or have you, met other people from there, and you draw similarities between them?
I haven't met that many Lebanese Jews, but you're talking about Jewish people in those countries?
Yeah, I would think so.
The Syrian Jews are, to some extent, the Jews from Aleppo, Halabi, they call them Aleppo, are very much like Mashadis. They're very trying to protect their heritage and do, so there is a lot of pressure on only marrying the Syrians and staying within the fold and doing things. And they do a lot of chesed work also, but they take care of themselves rather than entire community. And they don't get along with the Jews from Damascus, for instance. They have so there is some similarity with Syrian Jews. There is a big Syrian Jewish community in Brooklyn, in Flatbush. And actually, we were there in a couple of schools that there had a lot of Syrian Jews. So there are similarities. They are actually a bit extreme that they don't even, if you marry a non-Syrian, they essentially say goodbye to you. No, the Mashadis are not that way. They're not. They actually, they love Dalia. They open with open arms each time we go there. My cousins and others. But we are not that. The Mashadis are not that extreme. But that's the closest thing I can see is with Syria.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Robin. I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you.
More questions and to wrap up, I guess.
Thank you. I'm going to, was there another question that somebody wanted to ask?
I think I tried to get to most of the ones I saw.
So then I will wrap up the program.
Sure,
and
sure.
I want to thank you, Dalia, and you, Farokh, for the time that you spent preparing for this interview. I was thinking about the question that was asked in the promotional material for this program: what do Mexico and Iran have in common? And really what I was thinking about is, what do Mexico, Iran, New York, Montreal, Denver, those places that both of you and your families have traveled and lived, and in spite of so much movement and so much travel around the world, what you have in common, what we all have in common, is our Jewish history and our Jewish destiny. And I think that that's evidenced by the fact that, Dalia, when you said that you and Farokh had connections in Denver, and we did not know that when we matched the two of you. So the fact that we in our shul could bring the two of you together to tell this Jewish story is really quite remarkable. And I just want to thank both of you for sharing your stories. And really what you did was prove once again what an incredible community we have, and what a rich community, what a diverse community, what an accepting and warm community. And I personally feel very lucky to be a part of it. And we appreciate your generosity, both of you, in your time and sharing your stories.
Thanks very much.
Look forward to the next program. You're welcome. Thank you so much. And we'll say good night and look forward to
Yashikoa, Farokh. Beautifully done.
Thank you very much. Farokh.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful program, Robin.
Thank you. Thank
Well
you
done.
for being part of it.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you for sharing.
Amazing.
Thanks.
Story.
Thanks much.
2 thumbs up.
Thank you very much, Farokh.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Dalia.
Good night,
My
everyone.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Yashikoa.
It's Louis. Hi, Louis. Hi.
Thank you very much and good night.
Good night, Eves. Good night.
See you soon.
Good night. Thanks very much.